Hello everybody, this is Lunaris Aileron and tonight I'm gonna talk about this anime called Heavy Object. This is not a review, but in this series I will talk about random stuff that I find amusing in random anime, and I want something that is fairly simple and quick as a test video, so I choose this. Heavy Object is a mecha sci-fi anime. I watched like only 4 or 5 episodes and I think it's pretty bad. There's plenty of reason why I think it's bad and I don't enjoy it at all. It has plenty of fan service that is really discouraging for me to watch. The annoying kind of fan service that I don't really like. And the plot is pretty idiotic. But in this anime, the titular object is actually the mecha. As you can see from this picture, the behind them is what the anime called object, as in the so-called mecha. The design is pretty dumb. I hate it. I hate the concept of object. But basically, what I want to talk about in this video is that in one of the scene, around episode 3 I think, or maybe earlier, I don't remember, it has been few years this been aired. There is this screen cap that I took that the anime described. The plot says that because due to the technology that make building this kind of object possible, for some reason countries and territories kind of divided up, and many smaller territories crop up instead of bigger nations, bigger countries. Like if you look at this picture, you can see that Australia is divided, Africa, every single country is divided into smaller territories, and that's why the main character described it as the world map looks like a stained glass window. But if you look at this map, when I look at this map, I think it's pretty stupid way to describe this, to illustrate this, because let's look at the population spread of our real world. This is the population spread or population density of Asia, Russia, and yes, Asia and Russia. As you can see, most of the population are concentrated in only certain places. If we ignore the Eastern China and most of India, most of this territory are pretty empty, especially in the northern Russia. And if you look at the Malaysia and Indonesia, there's plenty of places where there's only 1 to 2 people per square kilometer, as you can see from the statistic below. So if we compare it side by side, for example, in heavy object map, it illustrates that the area around Russia, a little bit among Mongolia and China, the places that has practically no people. But in heavy objects universe, for some reason, these places are divided into many territories, and we are talking about when a bunch of small countries maintaining this huge mecha thing, this mecha thing that is capable of war and military. And this concept itself is pretty absurd. Like, for example, many various military forces in the world cannot function just because they are missing a couple of valuable resources that can only be obtained in certain part of the world, like in Africa. I mean, like the additive in oil, all the precious metals that is required to make semiconductors and microchips, or for all the computer stuff, and then not to mention oil for fuel and various other things that usually military forces in the world, in various countries, export it from various other places, like business, you know. So this kind of map is pretty implausible, because if you have like 10,000 times more countries than there are in our current world, it's pretty impractical, and there's no way that some of these places can maintain this mecha, this object mecha thingy to make them work. In reality, it should be more practical to have. It is more likely that instead of these smaller countries, there will be a bigger country that has many mechs instead of one country one mech as it described in the anime. Not exactly, but there are I watched until like episode 4 or 5. I think the anime actually shows that there are that territory with many objects instead. But my point is that this map on the left is pretty absurd. Other example is in the Australia. As you can see from the right map, most of Australia is pretty empty. Most of like 80% of the country has less than 0.1% per square kilometer. But if you look at the map on the left, some of these places, some of this territory literally has like a few dozen people. So it's pretty dumb. I think it's just the writer just look at map and divide them into whatever the hell she wants, without actually knowing the population spread or how population is spread realistically. Because if you are talking about reality, civilization tends to start in the coastal area. As you can see in the right side of the map, you can see there's Perth, Canberra, Sydney, and I forgot what other city Australia has, but those cities are usually in the coastal area on the seaside. I think if you are writing a war story that involves the whole world, it is also pretty important to know how population spread and how geography affect how resources are spread and how countries can be built. Like for example, there is an anime where for some reason the superpower country, the equivalent of like something like America, but for some reason the country is landlocked, as in the territory has no borders on water. If you if your country want to be strong, it is very necessary to have water access to sea, because that is your trade route. There's very strategical implication for having sea. So if I want to give advice to a writer who wants to write about a more realistic political war story, if you want to make a superpower country, make the country has a large access to water. Maybe like at least half of the country has access to half of the country's border is waterlogged, something like that.